Some people have negative associations with the word course because you could argue the market's been flooded with a lot of really low quality content as well.
There is, I think, a huckster reputation in the online course space. People who selling financial products and get rich quick schemes. I think that there's like legitimate cautiousness that people might take to the industry because I think some of the earliest probably successes in the space were people who did that.
I don't know that I've been doing this as long as you, Tom, but when I look back at the last 2 to 3 years, sort of seeing the creator economy and the market evolve, to me, there's been a really tight correlation between the increased importance of owned media and the rise of more creator operator types. And my hypothesis would be that, you know, when you talk to some of these bigger creators who maybe they grew a big following on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube, they're really comfortable in that in that domain. They understand it super well. They understand how to build an audience, make super high quality content. Once you start bridging beyond that to this more owned media sphere where you're talking about building out owned content properties and collecting email addresses and, you know, conversion rates at checkout, then the skill set shifts a little bit. And so I don't know if it's a perfect like one-to-one correlation, but the rise of one seems to have driven the rise of another. Does that make sense?
I totally agree. And I think, like, to your point, what makes someone really good at generating rented media, which is like very top of the funnel, does not necessarily mean that they'll be very good at the owned part, which I think you and I would probably both agree are necessary. It is a necessary skill set, I think, to building a really compelling, profitable business. And I think there's maturity around how to build owned audience in a way that a creator might not want to shoulder, right? Like, that's probably not the thing that gets them up in the morning. Whereas I think there's certainly folks who want to support a creator who'd be like, hey, listen, I would love to stand up an email strategy with you and own that end to end, and a content strategy that supports owned media versus rented media, and help you think strategically about how those two things can be synergistic or not. So yeah, totally. I see those as like, I see the rising tide of the creator economy, I think, has produced that. I think that COO kind of opportunity, I think, for folks.
So I'd love to explore a little bit more with you. You know, we talked about rented media and owned media, but maybe going a bit deeper into courses specifically. And one of the reasons I'm so interested in exploring the courses topic with you, besides the fact that you're an expert and have great perspectives on it, is that it seems to me the courses market is changing and has changed a lot over the last decade. And I know, talking to some creators, that, you know, some people have positive associations with the courses word, and other people have, whether creators or learners, some people have negative associations with the word course. I think maybe in part because I think there's really good courses out there for sure, really high quality, drive real transformation in learners, but the market you could argue the market's been flooded with a lot of really low quality content as well. So curious your take first, maybe on your perspective from the inside on how the market's transformed maybe over the last decade or half a decade.
Yeah, for sure. It's a good question. I think like I suppose I'm so positive in the space that sometimes like I'm such an evangelist that I maybe don't spend enough time to think about. I think there's, I think, a huckster reputation in the online course space. People who selling financial products and get rich quick schemes. I think that there's like legitimate cautiousness that people might take to the industry because I think some of the earliest probably successes in the space were people who did that. I think though, what's clear though, and what gets us excited, is that there's some people with such tremendous insight who have such unique points of view on things that it can be a really, really valuable, I think you use the word transformative. You can really provide transformative, inexpensive things for folks, almost regardless of the category you're in. And my hope is that, like, to your point, as the category keeps maturing, that the reputation, I think, that the reputation of the space encourages more folks with interesting perspectives to share, to join it and build really good business on it. And just because we see so many wonderful businesses being built on this, despite maybe that original kind of icky feeling that some people get with the space.
And I don't know that everyone has an icky feeling, but I certainly think that I get the sense that there are a lot of learners who have bought a lot of courses and maybe didn't follow through on them. And so you're an expert, I think, at building courses that drive real transformation. So what can you do as a creator? What does Course Studio do to drive that real transformation and deliver on the course promise?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I guess the first point, not to like be evasive about it, I don't know if there's silver bullets for each course. I think there's a ton of variables that kind of inform how you should think about a course. For example, like, do you want to have a community component where you're proactively participating and creating accountability? It is very clear that that drives better student outcomes, but that's kind of an expensive thing to do.
Can you say more about that? Why is that expensive?
Because I think the scarcest resource we all have is time. And I think for a creator, they're especially conscious of that. And so I love this notion of zero marginal cost, what is so good about the online course and membership space is you create a valuable thing, and you can distribute that infinitely with very, very low cost, which is why they can be such good businesses. Whereas if you're advertising a community that requires your time, you should be pricing your time as quite valuable. And so if you launch a course with a community, we've seen this with a lot of our folks, they will do it for 2 cohorts, 3 cohorts, and then they'll say, man, this is an enormous investment of my time. And a lot of times that's not what people get.
It's surprisingly time intensive to get the community flywheel spinning and then to moderate it over time. And then to your point, it probably depends a bit on your category, your price points, but it's not always clear. It's also not always clear maybe sometimes where community ends and coaching starts, or vice versa.
For sure.
And so then you have to sort of right size the value and the pricing. Are you more a community? Are you more coaching? At least what I've seen.
Yeah, for sure. And I think and you just brought up a good point that I think we're almost always really supportive of with our partners is like, if they are launching their first digital product and we have a hypothesis about a really valuable course, and to answer your first question, one of our orientations is every piece of content that we put in a course, every lesson, would ask ourselves, is this something a year from now this student would reflect back on and comment as a valuable thing they took from the course? So that's kind of the lens you try to bring to any piece of like educational content we bring to a course. But to kind of come back to the kind of community notion, we are very supportive of folks launching communities, especially for their first product, just because the feedback loop is it's synchronous, it's live. You can hear, are the dogs liking the dog food? Which is like, that's maybe not the best analogy. It's an analogy I use a lot to like understand product market fit, or whether a product is like finding resonance in a market. And I think that can be really, really valuable. You might get an insight like, hey, that like lesson had like such a tremendous, like that helped me think about myself in a way I didn't think of. And maybe that helps inform your next launch, your next course, your next paid product. That's where it can be really valuable. The insight from a community can be great. And I think to your point, maybe people say they really love coaching and you love coaching and maybe you want to launch it. Like, I think those touch points can yield a lot of insight that is tough to get in the absence of a community.
And then just to summarize that, so the pros and cons maybe of something like community as a way to deliver on transformations are: pros, it helps people, it can help people deliver on transformations through accountability, whether it's like coach to learner or peer to peer.
Totally.
And it helps getting this like tight feedback loop to understand if your content is landing, if it's delivering. Cons, time intensive, can be expensive. It doesn't have that sort of zero marginal cost to distribution dynamic that you like. Thank you for tuning in to the Creator COO. If you enjoyed that clip with this week's guest, click the link on the screen now to go watch the full episode. See you there.